want to talk to you about age. Not the age you are, or the age you feel, or the age you wish you were. I want to talk to you about how your age, I think, doesn't really matter. I also want to talk to you about millennials. Not because I'm an expert, but because I was given a gift from millennials that taught me a lot about why my age doesn't really matter. You see, I was the oldest guy at Facebook. I worked for the most millennial company on earth during the most dynamic period in its history. And I was about as far from millennial as you could get. When I joined Facebook to help set up the Australia and New Zealand business, the average Facebook employee was 25 years old, and CEO Mark Zuckerberg was 27. I was 47. Not old in most people's language, but a grandfather in Facebook years. And to my knowledge, the oldest person the company had ever hired. On the subject of age, this was what my new boss thought about people like him versus people like me. Demographers would call me a baby boomer, although I barely slipped into that club moments before membership closed. I was born on the second last day of the baby boom era, December 30th, 1964. As millions of boomers were struggling against a rising tide of digital natives, inside Facebook, I was living in a kind of millennial nirvana. Within days, I became known by a nickname bestowed on me by my youthful Facebook colleagues, OMS, for Old Man Scheeler. In those early days, it was easy to become lost inside Facebook because there really were no job descriptions, no org charts, no existing person to hand things over to you, nothing to tell you how to do your job or what your job even was. Facebook was a company without a lot of age. But what it was a hot tub of earnest, well-meaning people with a deep faith in humankind and technology that was, frankly, intoxicating. I remember after my first week, I got a phone call from a very important Facebook exec. He said, I've talked to a few people around the office to see how you're going, and I have one piece of feedback. I braced myself. What could be this one thing he was calling me from the other side of the world to say? You don't smile enough. That was it. Critics of millennials will tell you that millennials are bad at a lot of things, like gratitude, being present, patience, or having a sense of appreciation for what has gone before. But my daily experience inside Facebook showed me that these critics were wrong, at least as far as these Facebook millennials were concerned. They were pretty good at a lot of these things. Take gratitude. When I first started, many of Facebook's employees had never worked for another company. All they'd ever known was the Facebook world of lofty ambition, fueled by a constant diet of Facebook perks. Free food, free health insurance, free gym membership, free ice cream after the gym, free toothbrush and toothpaste in every bathroom, free buses, free valet parking when you skip the bus and decide to drive, free laundry, free dry cleaning, even free egg freezing for your future IVF baby. For those of us who'd worked for normal companies, these benefits were unimaginable. We felt like kids set free in the candy shop. But for the Facebook lifers, these perks didn't factor at all into how satisfied they were about working for the company. It was like, yeah, the free food and dry cleaning and egg freezing are good, yeah, thanks, but can't we make an even bigger dent in the universe? And of course, we all know that millennials are hopelessly distracted by their phones. But here, too, I found the critics could be wrong. I discovered this in a corner of Facebook where I least expected to find it. It was early in my time, and I was sitting in the front row of Mark's weekly company update. In that moment, I realized that sitting right next to me was the legendary Facebook coder who, in 2006, at the age of just 24, had invented the most powerful millennial creation in the history of humankind, the algorithm behind Facebook's newsfeed. As Mark got up to speak, everyone else in that room continued to scroll through their phones, barely looking up to glance at Mark. But this guy, he just tucked his phone away, folded his arms, and simply listened to Mark speak. Remember, this was the guy who invented the most addictive feature of the most addictive device in history. And here he sat, next to me, just listening. These Facebook millennials, they were at once uniquely privileged and idealistically impatient. They had the best iPhones, the newest and best Beats headsets, and the coolest threads. There was a sort of magic in the air around them. But I was OMS. At an average of 22 years their senior, I felt glaringly out of place, jaded in comparison, beaten down by my experience of how the real world really works, full of death, taxes, divorce, and stuff you actually have to pay for. So my early days at Facebook were just kind of weird. There was this tension between this utopian millennial idealism and the stark reminder in my bald head that I was not a true member of this club. I realized that to survive in this millennial hot tub, I needed a drastically different approach. I needed to admit that I knew nothing. Nothing about hacking or coding or social media. Nothing about moving fast and breaking things. I needed to admit that I knew nothing about how to do my job at Facebook or what other people did in their jobs. So I replaced my usual confidence, my lifetime of business experience, with a single, simple question. Can you help me learn? And I set out on what I came to call my ignorance tour, asking people high and low to teach me about their little slice of Facebook and what the hell I was supposed to be doing in my little slice. I became notorious for a weird meeting request entitled, "Teach me how to do your job in 45 minutes." I brought my team together and I wrote a number on the whiteboard. I asked them what that number said about me. Finally, one of them got it right. It's how many jobs you've had. So I listed out all my jobs, everything from shoveling snow in my New York childhood to baker, house painter, donut fryer, Japanese translator, entrepreneur, and corporate executive. And I asked each of them to do the same. Everyone came up with their number and shared their list of jobs. Even a 25-year-old has done a lot of interesting things. My point is that you are so much more than the job you are doing right now. Help me to understand who you are so I can do a better job of helping you be successful. And then there was good boss, bad boss. On 2 big pieces of paper, I asked my team to put down their unvarnished criteria for what they loved and hated in their bosses. What I wanted to know was what they thought should be the criteria for my success. And this way, instead of just guessing, they just told me. The number one thing they didn't want me to do, spoiler alert, was micromanagement. Reducing myself to this one simple question, can you help me learn, made me feel a little less like OMS and a little more like a millennial myself. Eventually, they even dropped the nickname. Over time, my age really did become irrelevant. And my ignorance tour taught me 5 things. I learned that from curiosity flows humility. When I first started saying, I know nothing, I really didn't believe it. But as people genuinely started to help me, I realized the humbling power of closing my mouth and opening my ears. I really didn't know as much as I thought. I learned that learning new things from scratch is so much easier than unlearning the stuff you already know. Because what you already know is full of painful lessons and hard assumptions. learning new things from scratch can feel so beautifully clean. I learned that nobody really cares about what you know. It's what you do that counts. That number that we all have, 22 in my case, is really just a starting point at unearthing what each of us have done to add layers of dexterity to the innate talents that we all have. I learned that curiosity is a superpower that we all possess. It flourishes in our youth, and it sadly dies in too many of us as life goes by. And finally, perhaps most unmillennially of all, I learned to be present, to turn off my phone, ignore my emails, texts, and feeds, and to be there in the moment with that person, to do what you are doing right now, just listening. In the years that have passed since my ignorance tour, I've seen Facebook grow up, and many of its millennials get married, have kids, buy houses, do all those things that make life a little less idealistic hot tub and a little more grinded out reality. Even the boss seems to have changed. I am still no expert on millennials, but I owe a lot to everyone I worked with at Facebook who took me in and taught me their strange ways. Reducing myself to that one simple question, can you help me learn? Well, it renewed me in ways I never thought possible. And perhaps most magically, it made me redefine the whole meaning of age. Near the end of my time at Facebook, I flew back to my hometown in the States to visit my 88-year-old father. That night, we visited an old restaurant on a winding country road that my family had frequented when I was a child. During the evening, the restaurant's owner came to our table, and we learned that he too was in his 88th year and had owned this restaurant his entire adult life. This is such a terrific place, I told him. My family used to come here when I was a boy. I'll never forget his reply. He just smiled at me and said, "You're still a boy." Thank you.